Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. So thank you for joining us for our in-house recruitment webinar. My name, for those of you who aren't familiar with myself, is Natasha Priya-Cannon, and I'm the Managing Director at In-House Recruitment, one of the fastest growing communities for in-house recruiters and HR professionals in the UK. Today's webinar, we're delighted to be in partnership with Hired. And for those of you who don't know who they are a career marketplace that intelligently matches tech talent with the world's most innovative companies like yourselves. So they combine cutting edge tech with unbiased career coaching so that both talent and employers can find the right fit faster. The title of today's webinar session is Building an Employer Brand to Attract Top Tech Talent, which, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, is an extremely hot topic in the industry right now. We're delighted to be joined by Bobbie from Pizza Hut, Jack from Monzo, and also Gordon from Hired, and they will be our presenters for the next 40 minutes or so. For those of you who have any questions as the session goes on, please do feel free to pop in your questions on the right-hand side throughout the presentations. We can then ask those questions at the end. There also will be a poll throughout the session, so do keep an eye out for when this goes live, and you will see the results, which will then be talked through as well. So without further ado, please let me pass you over to our lovely speakers today. So Gordon, Bobbie and Jack, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Hi there, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Gordon. I head up the European team here at Hired. Very, very excited. We've got two extremely experienced people here to kind of share some knowledge and expertise with all of you. So I'll hand it over to the two of you to introduce yourself. Bobbie, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So afternoon, everybody. I'm Bobbie, and I am head of talent for Pizza Hut Digital Ventures. My background is I've done about 10 years in technology, starting in investment banking, and moved on to tech startups, helping them either digitally go through a transformation or scale globally.
Hey everyone, I'm Jack. I've been working in talent for about 10 years, mainly with high growth tech companies. I'm currently the tech hiring lead at Monzo Bank. I've been there for about 14 months now, so helping the business scale from around sort of 200 to 800 people in that time. Yeah.
Great. Well, look, thank you both. I'm sure we're going to have lots of interesting stuff to cover off today. And I think what's interesting is you're both coming from quite different businesses with different perspectives. And I know historically you've worked for a variety of different companies as well. So hopefully for whoever's kind of on the webinar today, we can make stuff as applicable as possible for people. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, firstly, key thing is to discover what employer brand means for your organisations that you're working for at the moment, how to create alignment across employer brand, company culture, and company values, and try and keep those things all joined up because it's not always a straightforward thing to do. And then finally, how to bring employer brand into your talent acquisition strategy. Obviously, I know that you both have extremely aggressive hiring goals. So how do you kind of manage the needs of the business and aggressive delivery targets with maintaining the kind of employer brand piece throughout the journey as well? So in terms of why this is important, we each year run a report called the Brand Health Report, which is essentially a survey that Hired does, going out to candidates, understanding what's important to them in terms of when they're looking for their next opportunity. 45% of the candidates that we surveyed last year said that company culture was the top factor that they considered when looking for a new position. So it's obviously a hugely important thing in what is a very competitive market. So it's something that we need to kind of take seriously. So to kind of kick things off, in terms of, everyone might have a slightly different perception of this, but Bobbie, from your perspective, what are your views? What is employer brand?
Yeah, employer brand, I would summarize as basically your company values and your current culture. And hopefully you're actually reflecting that in your employer brand by embedding what your identified values and culture is. And that's something that is becoming more and more important to each and every hire that comes through the door, in ensuring the confidence that you're hiring the right people and that they're happy when they do arrive. And of course, it's your reputation when you're out there in the marketplace, what people associate with you, and the best proof of who you are and what you do is your current employees. And they should reflect to your actual values, which hopefully you embed into your branding prospects.
Yeah. Jack, anything to kind of add in addition to that?
I think agree with all of that. I think, yeah, it's kind of like the identity of what it's like to work at the company, and the reputation it has as an employer. I think it's very much should embody what your values are and like can be presented in various forms. So whether it's like blogs, videos, testimonials, the tone of voice that you use. I think where it gets into when people talk more about like employee value proposition, it's kind of more when it comes into like, what does it feel like to interview at the company? What does it feel like onboarding when you join? So I guess it's kind of like the first part of the kind of potential employee journey if that person does end up working for you. So that's kind of what it is to me.
And why does it matter?
I would say, going back to what I just said, like I think it's usually one of the first things that a potential employee will see. There's obviously loads of benefits in terms of building like long-term talent pipelines, having engagement. So I definitely think like it can produce some like quick wins, which is great when you're hiring and you're trying to scale a company, but it's also a very sustainable way of building a group of people who are like engaged with your brand and would want to work for you. Going back to like the sort of employee value proposition part, I think it really sets the tone for the whole kind of journey from, you know, discovering that they want to apply to your company all the way through to the interview process, understanding how to prepare for your interview, understanding what it's going to be like when they actually come in on the day. And I think it just basically gives people a window into what it's really like to work for your company and if it's the right company for them. So loads of different benefits from like the first part all the way through to actually working and joining the business and having that belonging.
One thing that I know from speaking to a lot of customers who are kind of going through this journey and seeing challenges is not always, I think, to a recruitment and talent acquisition function, like people generally get this, like this is important because this helps us go out to the market and hire talent. But elsewhere in the business, people don't necessarily understand the importance of an employer brand. So I don't know if either of you kind of got any practical advice for anyone who perhaps is finding it difficult internally to kind of sell this, the importance of employer brand to people outside of the talent function.
Sure. So from my experience, I think where the biggest wins have been is to really understand the time and the cost of replacing people that don't work out, and then making sure you speak to the relevant stakeholders internally to understand who needs to be involved in order to make the sort of brand proposition work, and then covering features such as why, great candidate experience, what our current values are, and are they reflected currently across our branding proposition at the moment, giving them maybe some research on feedback on what we're hearing about our brand at the moment as well, doing maybe surveys and reviews, and then sort of showing them evidence on where it has been a success, e.g. when we partnered up with you guys on Hired, we've never used it at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures before, but we've had a previous case study where obviously it was a huge success because we were able to showcase through videos and summaries and testimonials on who we are, so the stakeholder is a lot more convinced when you present data. I mean, in my environment, when you want people to make decisions, you get everybody to collaborate, and data helps a lot. And so getting that feedback initially, presenting it, and then showing the fact that, doing a targeted search in order to achieve what we're trying to, I think you could pretty much bring everybody on board.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the time and costings I hear is obviously just a really popular one. If you're able to kind of demonstrate to people internally that this is actually going to be really expensive to the business if we don't take this thing seriously and have a clear strategy in place.
Yeah, I think like we're obviously, especially in tech, in a candidate short market, and like if you're trying to sustainably scale and build a company, like it's very easy to as a hiring team to bias towards like head down, let's hire, let's source people. But like the way that I would kind of go about buying, as well as like what Bobbie said, data being super important, is you need to think like, okay, we're doing these things now, maybe they're not bringing us candidates next week, but in 2 to 3 months, 3 to 4 months, like we're building a sustainable talent pool. And I think being in a position where you've got great talent coming to you because they engage with your brand is really important. I think especially with like most candidates that tech companies want to hire being passive, if your employer brand is good and they're engaged with it, yes, okay, they might not apply for a job straight away. But when they do decide to make that move, you're front of mind. They have that kind of like connection with what you're trying to do. So I think it's definitely like more medium term view.
Yeah.
There's also some quick tactical things that you can do as well to make an impact instantly.
In terms of any particular challenges that you found, because both of you have done this, several times before, when you're kind of looking to kind of figure out, right, what is our employer brand as opposed to our corporate brand? Are there any kind of challenges or bits of advice that you have for people there?
Yeah, I mean, we've had multiple challenges, e.g. when you come to a stage where you've actually grown your organisation, and you sort of, everybody's coming from their different backgrounds and experiences. You have to make sure that everybody actually understands what your current values are, and that when you're going through an interview process and when you're approaching the marketplace, that is that consistent message going across. I think the challenge can be when you don't have a dedicated resource. Many organizations have dedicated teams just working on branding and marketing and digital marketing, and just pushing, your culture and values out there to say, we exist and we're a great organization to work for. For most, it's not the case. They'll probably have their internal teams. For us, it's actually the responsibility and the challenge lies with the employees. So that's anyone from our engineers, from designers, product, all the way through to the stakeholders and the leadership as well. So just getting people into a room, making sure that we share that ownership and that we agree on what that looks like. And then anybody new who joins the interviewing panel or becomes an ambassador or cultural ambassador, which is what we employ as well. It's really important that that consistency stays in place as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think probably first challenge, depending on different companies that I've worked or consulted for, is like, you really need to understand your culture, what it is actually like to work for you. Once you understand that, it's making sure that you portray it in like a really honest and authentic way, and also working out like what the right channels that you want to share on based on whether you're hiring tech or you're hiring non-tech roles or you're in this market, this territory. I think definitely to what Bobbie said, especially when you're working in a company where maybe you're growing really fast, you don't have loads of money or resource or whatever it is, like time is everyone's, or hiring team's most precious commodity. So like when you're scaling, finding the time to invest in employer brand could be really hard. Obviously some companies, like Bobbie alluded to, have like an established employer brand team that might work between hiring and marketing. So I think it's working out like what the trade-off is, and I really believe in having like a shared ownership. So maybe hiring is like the focal point of like, here are the strategy, the things we're trying to do, but really engaging people from your business to be like your ambassadors and your managers become your employer brand, whether that's through like video, speaking, that kind of stuff. Definitely have seen this like so far at Monzo, I would say, just because it's been moving so fast. We're quite lucky that the company has a really strong brand already, so we're obviously trying to leverage that. I guess something that's worked quite well is if you create like the collateral, materials and structure for everyone to be consistent with the employer brand, then for example, recruiters and managers can kind of do their own things and it stays like consistent with everything, as opposed to like, I guess one of the risks is when you have like a shared ownership of employer brands, people can kind of go off in all different directions. So I think having that like centralized, this is how it should look and how it should feel, and you're all kind of catching up on that, making sure that it's consistent is really important.
I think that's a really good point. I think I've heard lots of people kind of mention that, just the importance of getting other people within the business involved in this sort of thing, because number one, it makes your life a little bit easier. Like you say, time's short, you're interviewing people, you're sourcing for people, you and your teams are kind of really busy with that stuff, but actually getting people in the business involved gives them another aspect of their job. They're kind of accountable and responsible for supporting too. But I also think it really gives them some insight into the challenges that you're facing, because obviously hiring in this market is very, very tricky. Very challenging. So actually opening that up to hiring managers and other people in the business and kind of letting them see what a challenging market it is can only kind of help educate people internally.
I think it comes back to like, in my opinion, like a company that's growing, everyone is responsible for hiring in some way or the other. So I think like as a hiring person, or if you have an employer brand person in your team, like give the structure, give the consistency, all the kind of like parameters they need for it not to become like inconsistent, and then going from there, it's a bit easier if you haven't got like a whole team that's just going to do it for you.
Now, Monzo and Pizza Hut, obviously both pretty well-known brands, and I guess to a certain extent that could potentially be a blessing, or it could be a curse when it comes to hiring. Bobbie, everyone knows Pizza Hut.
I like pizza.
I like pizza. Everyone likes pizza. Most people like pizza. But I guess, and this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suppose like outside looking in, I'd probably say people are probably going to have a preconceived opinion about Pizza Hut. This is what the business does, and then start forming judgments before you've even had the opportunity to kind of reach out and have a conversation with them.
That has certainly been the case. So when I first arrived about 2 years ago and joined the team, I found that consistently everyone's opinion of who they assumed we were their experience of sitting in a Pizza Hut restaurant, or maybe even being, an employee there during the university days. So it was a huge educational piece, and immediately that meant that we needed to focus on our branding, because of the fact that it goes hand in hand in educating the marketplace of who we really are, because our inception came from the fact that our customers' behavioral patterns changed. Everything was digitalizing, and the movement was going towards fast food, quality food, on time, etc. But we weren't in a position to do that. So 2 years ago, we went through a digital transformation and rolled out across the UK, Europe, Asia, and now in Dallas as well. And I must say, when you're speaking to the candidates now, we have a lot more presence. They do see us as an entity that is more than just, say, a pizza company. We are also a tech company that provides an awesome environment to work, and also a tech company that would be a great place to work. And I think that is a testament from all the experience and efforts from the employees consciously, making a purpose effort to educate in the right communities. E.g., we've used Hired now for almost 2 years, and 50% of our hires of employees have come from Hired successfully. And that's because we're talking in the right environments. And I worked really closely with the account managers at Hired, where they worked deliberately alongside us to make sure that the content that we were sharing with these candidates is a hugely competitive market. And so what do you do in order to stand out and walk away from that image of just a restaurant, but actually a tech company that would be a great place to work? And we worked really closely and successfully, put together some material that, of course, we all had signed off against our values, etc. And you can find that on Hired platform, and that's actually increased our contact with candidates across the communities, and people who would normally say this is an industry sector we wouldn't be interested in are now suddenly interested, because they see us more than just a restaurant.
I was going to say it's very similar. So when I arrived at Just Eat, I think everyone just associates oh, it's that takeaway app. Obviously it would be a technology company considering it's app based, but just didn't really have that identity quite yet as a really amazing tech place to work. And I think over time, I think it's, I think sometimes depending on what your consumer brand is, it can be quite similar to your employer brand. But I think sometimes in businesses like this, where it's just not that association with being a tech company or whatever, it's really, it's an okay thing to have almost not a sub brand, but something that still aligns to the overall values, the purpose, the mission of the company, but really shows that it's a tech company. And I think at Just Eat it was very similar. The team were great with communities, with blogs, with lots of open source stuff for engineers, which was pretty interesting. And then I'd probably say on the Monzo side, I felt really lucky coming to Monzo because the marketing team and the tone of voice was just awesome. And I think interestingly, the brand for consumers is quite similar to the brand for employees. And I think a lot of the values, although we haven't officially said these are our values yet, really sort of resonate on both sides. So that's been pretty cool to see how it differs from going to a company that people don't always associate as that kind of employer brand, but then going somewhere where it's kind of wrapped into one, which might change over time. I don't know. We'll see. So.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Moving into the second part of this discussion, which is aligning the external brand and your internal culture. We've got a poll at the moment, so for everybody who is on the call, really keen to find out if you, within your organisation, have defined company values. And while we're kind of waiting for those responses to come in, Jack, Bobbie, Pizza Hut, Monzo, do you have values defined?
We're actually a work in progress.
Okay.
We have our core that we, obviously have employed and have streamlined across our recruitment, because there's some that we live and die by. And so we have incorporated that into our strategy of hiring and branding. However, it's still a work in progress, because when we first started a little over 2 years ago, we were 11 people in one office in Paddington, and now we're over 100 people. Based in our new offices in Marylebone, and we have offices in Dallas and Vietnam, and so bringing on all this new talent and employees have meant that we needed to sort of evolve together, and it's constantly being changed. However, the blueprint of what we live and die by is more or less there, and we obviously are utilizing that in order to hire hopefully more successful matches.
Yeah, we're in the process of defining them at Monzo, which we're fairly close to finishing, I think. Fingers crossed very soon, which is really exciting.
Were there any before, or is this the first time?
No, this is the first time. It's obviously only been around for like 4 years, which obviously feels, or in what we've done, it feels like a short time. But yeah, so it was quite a strange thing, because like everyone has this like feeling of what they are, but no one, like, we hadn't yet kind of like put it into words and said like these are the values. I think as we've got bigger, now it's more important that people kind of like have something that they can really like look at and think, okay, like here are the values, but it's more like, how do I make decisions based on these values? What are the principles? As a company gets bigger, like it's very easy to not necessarily have your values in like words or whatever when you're smaller, but then as you get bigger, it feels important that people have something to connect to, make decisions by, do their interviews by, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I hope we will finish them very soon, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting to have been a part of that. It's interesting also because, Bobbie, I guess to some extent you're saying that it's changed a lot, because you start off with a set that when you're a small business, and then when you grow and evolve, they have to change. But you're at Monzo, Jack, you're basically saying that you've waited almost until you're at a certain size and you feel confident about trying to get some locked in that should be sustainable.
Yeah, I just think, it's literally based on size. Like as you get bigger, you need something that connects everyone. Like I think the main thing is that they're not like just something that you like write on the wall. Like I think they have to be made real and made practical.
Yeah.
So it's like, here are the values, like what do they actually mean? How do we make decisions with these values? How do these values go into our interview process? So like my thing with values is I just want them to be like practical and real. Otherwise they are just like words. So yeah, that's been really exciting so far.
And in terms of the results there, so 90% of the people who responded just there said they do have company values, but 10% don't. So there are some people listening here that don't have that. So I guess just briefly, because I know we're sort of a little bit behind track at the moment, what's the process that you went through when you kind of started out this exercise for those people that don't have this?
So we started off with a company survey, which was super interesting. And I think there's like one or two things that like were just really clear on every single survey around what one of our values would be. Once we've done that, it's about like reviewing the data, understanding the data, I guess kind of like grouping any symmetries between like these particular themes and things like that. There was a lot of focus groups and workshops across the business. I think it's like the most important thing with that is mixing people of different areas of the business, different levels of seniority. Like I think I have seen it done before where a company were like, oh, well, our executive team will now go work with this company and make values. And I believe that's like totally the wrong way to do it. So I think mix everyone up from like your frontline customer operations to your senior, whatever, and do lots of focus groups and try and start to find what they mean. Loads of feedback, iterations, really understand like what it is that you're trying to put into words and what the like practical stuff that you would do is. I think our writing and sort of marketing team, which are awesome, have been helping like put that into words that really explain how everyone feels and what they think they are. Share them with the company for feedback, more workshops, focus groups, defining, iterating. And then I think the most important part at the end, once you've kind of got them, is then like building them out and saying like, like what do these mean? What are the behaviors that you associate with them? That kind of stuff. Like how are they in real life? Like operationally, what do they look like as well?
And so they don't end up just being pictures on the wall.
Yeah, like how do you make decisions based on your values? Like would be a key thing to think about.
Okay, great. And in terms of taking that to a step further forward, so you've got your sort of cultural values piece, you're starting to work on your employer brand. When you're actually now at the stage of meeting people, you've done the bit of getting them through the door, I guess, but when it actually comes to your interview process, again, hugely competitive market, we need to move quickly. How do you kind of, what advice would you have for anybody in how you get that piece across during the interview process?
For us, we basically made sure that it's a clear definition of what that actually looks like, your values. And then we've actually adapted it depending on which department they're hiring for, whether it's technical, non-technical. And then we've incorporated it into, say, competency-based questions, which I would say, most people adhere by in interviews. Of course, we do technical testing to sort of assess their abilities and look at their portfolios. But I think most importantly for us, it's just making sure that what do we want to say that we'll be flexible on, and say maybe, it's not so necessary within a particular hire. And for others, it's, absolutely, we need someone with the following criteria, because without that, it won't be a great match. And what does great look like? How will we measure it? And when we see it, where's the add value in making this hire? And basically, we feel the same when we're getting feedback from candidates. They tend to say, actually, prior to coming into the interview, this is how I felt. Now that I went through the interview process, I feel like there was that connection there. I could tell that we share the same values, and that value might be a creative environment, flexible, being able to sort of give your opinion, not necessarily going through red tape, being able to work with, exciting tech stack, or maybe even working on, greenfield projects, whatever is important to them. Obviously, taking that feedback and then applying it. I think that really helped us secure the right people and keep attrition low as well.
Yeah.
I think that goes hand in hand, but it has a knock-on effect. It has quite a lot of variables that one needs to sort of bring in line. But I think most importantly, if you have a robust, streamlined recruitment process, you can always tweak, but you make sure that the core values always remain. So you're constantly reviewing, and when they're making decisions, you tell the hiring manager or whoever you're getting feedback from that, are you hiring with your gut? Are you hiring with the assessment? And you can find amazing people, but if they don't match you culturally, we tend to say no. Because for us, number one is your cultural fit.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I was at Just Eat, they actually changed the values after, I can't remember how long I was there for, but halfway through my role there, and they changed the values, which was really interesting. And one of the things I found worked quite well, especially if you have a cultural interview for every single role in the company, which I think we'll have at Monzo in the future as well, it's to run more of a practical session, again, all across the business, different levels, different people. In Just Eat, we actually went and did it in different countries, which was pretty fun, different markets that we were working in, but put the value on a whiteboard, get people to list and post and know the behaviors that they associate with that value. So taking it away from the word of the value or the kind of short phrase, and saying what are the behaviors, what does this actually feel and look like, talking it through, getting a common understanding together, and then asking the group what evidence or competency-based questions could you ask to assess those behaviors, and doing that across all the business depending on the size and different areas. But what's really nice then, and what happened at Just Eat, is we built up these really nice banks of values-based questions where we could, the whole business, from all 15 countries, could go and say, oh great, here are the questions they're asking about this value, what do they mean, is the signal that I'm looking for. So I think, that's a really practical way if you want to design a values-based interview. And like I said, at Monzo, I hope we'll do something similar. And then, everything from a recruiter reaching out to someone all the way through to every interview that they do, will always have that kind of common theme of here are the values, here's how we assess them.
That makes sense. And one thing I hear a lot about is the consistency piece, because I think sometimes I hear a lot of people working in the talent world getting a little bit frustrated, is probably a polite way of putting it, but where you kind of do a ton of work on this top of the funnel bit, making sure that you've got that messaging, you're going to market, you're explaining to candidates, the real value of why they should consider working for you. But then you still have control over the interview process, so you can influence that, like you said, with how you're interviewing and the people that you involve. But then when it gets to an onboarding, point of view, that's still employer brand then, right? You've still got somebody who just joined your company and forming an opinion and is going to go on and be an ambassador at whatever point they live in the future. Do you feel that within your businesses it's kind of joined up all the way through to that kind of onboarding process when people actually start in the role? Because the biggest frustration I hear is basically doing a ton of work, getting great people in, and then someone in the business drops the ball to an extent and the candidate has a poor experience but once they get on board.
For us at the moment, I think we've actually worked really hard to make sure that we don't just make a huge effort at the beginning to make sure that the candidate has a great experience, but the onboarding part is critical, like you said. And in my previous sort of experiences, I tend to find people drop the ball and they feel that when they came on board it wasn't the same as what was potentially expectations were. And so what we've done to sort of continue that experience is to make sure that that consistency is there, that it's still defined and aligned. So we keep resources, we call them blueprints where we are, or what we call workbooks. And literally it's like making reference back to what everybody is responsible for. Things go into diaries. If there's a new starter, a new leadership management coming into place, they know how to then adapt to the current alignments that we've made according to your location or team. So just having a structural, flexible structural process in place where you're making sure that the onboarding is equally as pleasant as the actual interview process. Because like you said, they're becoming future ambassadors and they end up, also hiring, being part of the process, because it is a group effort for us. So whether you're a contractor or PAMI in our environment, you're part of the interview process. Whether you're junior or a senior, you're part of the interview process. And we deliberately have a cultural interview in all our interviews because we're small enough to do that.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that when Jack touched on the fact that you need to have your values incorporated into your competency-based questions where one can make a reference to. I have seen that work in many organizations, and I think that when you want to incorporate with your onboarding as well, it just keeps people in line to make sure that you don't drop the ball.
Yeah. I think same for consistency. I think it has to flow all the way through. I think that's where it really comes about, like linking back to the core values and being really honest and authentic about what it is like to work at the place, and that also means talking about things that maybe aren't so good or being honest about the things that you're working on. So I think making sure that it's consistent, the way that your hiring process looks should flow really nicely into onboarding, and it should highlight the same things about the values, maybe more in the onboarding part. It's how do I now use these? How do I kind of live and operate within this kind of way that we do values? And I think, again, for me, it's just practicality. It goes back to the way that you make decisions, the way that you do things. I guess you could look at consistency the other way as well. Actually the stuff that you're putting out into the market, how does that stay consistent? So I think it's really important that whoever's doing employer brand activities, there's a really joint up approach. Make sure that you're engaging all the functions, people, marketing, all the different areas need to input into it. And I think Bobbie said it a few times, but things do change over time. So maybe your values won't change, but the way that you're looking at things slightly changes because of the size of the business. It's a different company than what it was. But I think for consistency externally, making sure you have the guidelines, the content's consistent, is really important.
Great, thank you both. And then right on to the final kind of section of this, and I guess this is trying to make it, I guess, a bit more practical. So any advice that you might have. So kind of theoretically, I've now built my employer brand. I've got it all kind of locked down. I know what my employer branding messaging looks like. I've got my values sorted. Where do I go to market with that? What would you say at the moment if you want to start telling that story to candidates and attract candidates and get people excited about all the work that you've done and you've built this brand? What advice would you have for people about where you sort of start in terms of specific channels, or where you would invest budget, where you would invest time to kind of get that brand out there?
So firstly, I would say you need to make sure that you're completely clear on what your values are and what your branding proposition would possibly look like. And then review how, Jack has mentioned multiple times, how true and honest it is really to its environment. And then reviewing things such as cost and potential platforms or outlets or communities that one needs to go into. So you might have to do a trade-off and say, okay, we want to use Hired as a platform, another platform similar to that, or we want to go out to market, or utilize social media more,
Yeah.
or go to meetups or recruitment events, and all of that takes time, cost, and usually a collective of people. So putting together what I call a recruitment plan, and aligning it with your branding proposition. I don't see it as two separate projects. I see it as one project that's broken down into priorities of cost and importance of what you're trying to achieve that year. So for example, for us right now, because we're hiring across engineering, product, and UX, we are utilizing the platforms that we feel bring in the best caliber of candidates and the right type of candidates. It's not always active candidates, it's usually passive as well. And so bearing that in mind, you might need to have several multiple projects going on. You might be working alongside marketing and design team in order to, like what we're doing at the moment, we're creating some video content.
Nice.
Why it's a great place to work here, some introductions into people from different departments, and we have to even consider a different approach to when we're dealing with, say, Generation X and these millennials that are coming through. So the juniors that we've hired have been really creative with us about what communities they hang out and what sort of methods we should be using. And not everything is a cost time, but time is a commodity. So you can't do everything.
I think that's a really good shout, actually. I think sometimes you can run the risk of making assumptions, can't you? You maybe sticking to sort of old habits, and this is what we've done historically. But I think what you're saying is actually going after people that you've just hired. Where do you hang out? Where do you spend your time? What events do you go to? What different social platforms are you using? Because that's, I guess, more likely to be effective.
Yeah, I would say I would start probably beginning with the strategy. So I'd probably map the entire journey. So from beginning to end, like very much the employer, well, I guess what I associate with the word employer brand more is like the first bit, the kind of like outside bit, but then also mapping that through to more like what feels like appropriate. So like the employee value proposition. So like, how does it feel when you actually arrive? So map the entire sort of process everywhere. There's a touch point on that. I then work out like how we need to prioritize things within that kind of entire sort of life cycle. Maybe it's like we're really trying to get more candidates into the top of the funnel, so maybe we're biasing towards a lot more of like the external part than the internal part to start with. I think working out, especially if you're in a situation where your business might not have total buy-in yet, mapping out how you're going to measure the return of investment from all the things that you do is a really good foundation to make sure that like when you start doing things, you can then go and talk to your stakeholder and say, hey, this is the impact that it's having. I think working out the right channels. So like, what are the right places? Like Bobbie mentioned, the people that you want to hire, the communities that they go to, the social networks they use, all of those kind of things, and making sure that you're like, okay, here are the places that we want to go and test out, like putting our employer brand and then see what return that you get.
Anything that you've seen in particular that stands out, or do you think it needs to be like a multi-threaded approach of different channels?
I think if you're starting from the beginning, it's good to do experiments, measure the return, try a lot of different things and see what works best for you, because if you just stick with one thing, you'll never know if the next thing's going to work. I think in my career, I've had a lot of success with community. So like the first thing I did when I got to Monzo, and Monzo already had a great like reputation of doing talks and some events and stuff like that. Obviously, it's all very much like a community-based company from how it arrived with like consumers and stuff, is like, okay, this is our core tech stack. What are the top 10 meetups that we want to host, that we want to be involved in? What are the interesting things that we're doing in those spaces that we can go and talk about, or we can write blogs about? So I think like events and community, although I've never looked at events like, oh, we're going to have an event with 200 people and I'm going to meet like 6 candidates for the roles that my team's hiring. It's very much more like have content you can then use to your reach outs, show that you're giving something to the community.
It's that medium term thing again, isn't it? It's like you might not hire people today, but it's more engaging with people.
I think on the flip side, there are like, and on that point, there are like quick tactical things that you can do. So if I was like really struggling to hire in a particular pipeline, although sometimes it's really hard to get the buy-in to say like, no, let's like stop doing this, like sourcing candidates. Let's just create some video content and then like pump that out or send it with our reach outs. But like sometimes quite a quick return of investment you can get is by doing like tactical employer branding around specific skill sets that you're trying to hire, and then putting that in the right places, sending it to the right people. So yeah, I think map in summary, map the process, make sure you know how you're going to measure the return of what you're doing, work out what parts to prioritize and stuff based on your needs, work out the right channels, test things, and be very creative with how you do it.
And then finally, I think it's pretty much kind of the last bit before we move on to any questions that might be out there. We've mentioned it a ton of times. I think everybody knows it's a competitive market. Any advice that you have on standing out?
Standing out, I would say, obviously, once you've identified who you are and what your values are, just be true to them and be honest to your candidates, because the worst thing you could do is missell an image. And then the reality is when they walk through the door is the opposite. That's a nightmare, because you're back to square one. You're replacing that individual. That individual goes out to the community and says it's not exactly how it is. Bad candidate experience, whether it's an employee, ex-employee, whatever it may be. I think it's very, very important just how we, see the importance of our customers who are using our product and getting that feedback. We also prioritize the feedback of our employees after the product itself. The most important commodity for us is our current employees. So honesty is key, and really like making sure that you live it, like Jack mentioned multiple times, that you've got to live those values. You've got to know how to embed and employ them in your day-to-day, either your decisions on a micro level to that global picture, which is, we do state that these are our values. Do we actually live, breathe by them?
Yeah, I think it's so true. I think that managing expectations and just being open and honest with people is so powerful, because we speak to a lot of candidates that they kind of they sign up to hire and they've been burnt because they were just set an expectation and kind of sold the dream because that company was obviously so desperate to get them through the door. But it's such a pointless exercise and such a waste of everyone's time if you can't actually deliver on it, or you've not been true, open with people.
Yeah, I think this is where it's like, employer brand is like almost sort of like the employee value proposition is like the entire life cycle. I think if you look at it just like we need to attract people, we need to hire people, and then you don't fix the part that's like what it's like when you get there, the inclusivity, then regardless of how much you stand out in the beginning, it's not going to work out very well towards the end. But I think to me, standing out is just being yourself and being really authentic. I think people don't really or sometimes when you're in these situations and you're hiring, you don't think so much about actually just really being honest, and like usually the things that are maybe not the greatest thing about working that place are actually the really interesting problems to solve. So almost like flipping it and being really authentic about it. I kind of leave it there. I don't think you should try and be like anyone else. Be yourself. Like obviously there's loads of tactical things you can do, like you said, around the channels that you put things in, standing out in the right places, making the extra effort, getting the whole company to really buy into it. But just be authentic, I think, is the main thing.
Great. Well, look, I think we're just about to jump into questions that we'll kind of pass on to the two of you to answer. But if there is anybody that's interested in learning more about Hired and what we do, it's, in a long story short, we just help companies hire tech candidates, and we're very, very good at that. We also have a ton of content and resources around various different things, about salary data, about diversity initiatives. So if you go onto hired.com, employers resources, that link there, which we will share with everybody, we've got a ton of interesting content and data that should be able to help people with conversations internally and potentially educating people outside of the talent function within your organizations. So Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. That was really insightful, and I think hopefully our people that have joined us found it insightful as well. So we have had a few questions come through, so I'll pose them to you guys if you could answer them for us. So probably the first one that's had a few votes on it is person from Nutmeg. So I hope you're well, Steve. So within a challenging time for tech talent, would you hire someone who is technically sound but not a great culture fit?
No way.
Starting off nice and easy.
It's like when you do that and you trade off on that, sometimes, especially depending on the role, the seniority, what the responsibility, I wouldn't do it personally. I don't think you should do it at any level. I think sometimes you might have like a potential concern, but you take a kind of risk based on other feelings, which is like okay, and sometimes those things work out, sometimes they won't. But that can like the ripple effect of doing that can have a really negative impact on your culture. And actually, more importantly, not just thinking about yourself, but actually if you hire that person, you're aware of this, that can have a really negative effect on their career. And like, why not be true and be honest with people and say like, no, actually, we don't think this is the right fit. Maybe we have a really strong feedback culture and that's not something you're comfortable with, even if you're just like, oh, they are the best engineer, the best product person. So I think like look after yourself, but really like think of the other person. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Jack. We would definitely trump a culture of tech ability. Loads of variables. It's just too time effective, cost, the impact on the team, the morale. When you bring someone negative into the situation, either they're not delivering or they dominate the organization and they don't work to the process and the team. And one of our values is the team. Our team is like a family, your work family. So therefore, we love opinionated people. We love people who are creative, who say strongly and stand behind what they deliver on. But if anyone's going to come in to disrupt to a level where, like Jack has mentioned, it actually impacts their career, it impacts you as a whole. And so no, I wouldn't think it's worth it. But I have seen times where there's someone exceptional technically and nobody has that skill set because it's so niche. And for a temporary period, individuals have invited them in to complete a project, not where I am currently, but have invited them in to complete a project. But the side, the consequences of, that particular hire are far too great.
Sometimes we do like a feedback interview if we're not quite sure. In some areas, sometimes like engineering manager hiring, that kind of stuff. Like if we're not sure, we'll bring the candidate in and give them the feedback, and then that's a really good way of actually saying, hey, is this person like able to adapt? Can they take on the feedback and kind of like mitigate risk? But yeah, I just think it's really hard sometimes because it's like we have a really high technical bar at Monzo, so it's like, gosh, you just want to hire this person. Yeah. But like you have to think of them and you have to think of the overall impact on everything. So.
I've muted myself. So just a quick question for you guys is what companies would you say are smashing it right now in?
Not allowed to say Monzo.
What an employer, so around employer brands. Who's Sorry, my bad.
It's a very interesting question because I like elements, a lot of elements from different organizations. E.g., I really like your Bio platform, not because I'm sitting here currently or I'm getting a major discount.
I haven't
you haven't bribed me, but it really is a great tool. However, when you're talking about organizations that are smashing it, it depends who you speak to, which community you're talking to. So, for example, SMR is doing awesome to bring together lots of tech startup organizations, and then there you see some cool, creative sort of branding styles coming out. So, I can't pinpoint anyone in particular, but usually it's the fact that if you've got a great brand, everyone's talking about you, there's a great buzz, and it's really true to its environment when you speak to the actual employees.
Definitely. And actually, as much as I joked about it, we, in our employer branding survey last year, Monzo were the #1 kind of most desired company to work for the developers or tech candidates that we surveyed in London. So as much as I was kind of joking about it there, I guess the business must be doing something right. So why do you think it is, or do you think that's fair? And why do you think it is?
I won't sit here and I wouldn't sit here and I've been in Monzo obviously for like a year and take credit for all of the employer brand, because like I said, one of the most interesting things, and obviously was like super thankful for when I arrived, is that the tone of voice, the marketing team, the way that the business was built on this like community of people trying to like input for Monzo to achieve something is just like totally unique. And of course now as we grow in the team and we have like more capacity, we have someone who's like focusing on the different channels of our employer brand and leveraging that and doing more things. And I think definitely when we have our values, it's going to become a lot more of a priority, because we really do see it as like, yes, the external employer brand, but what is this actually like the people experience to work there? So yeah, I can't take all the credit. I think it's just a very unique thing. So I think like hats off to kind of like early Monzo Norths and marketing people. And I'm very pleased that we now have this kind of incredible thing that they've built, which now with our experience, we can be like the focal point on really making that real as like a people collective. Yeah, I do like some of the big ones. Like I can't lie, like I love it, like Netflix I think what Bobbie said, like, it really depends who it is. Like, is it the industry you work in? Is it the type of role what's important? Like,
I don't really think there's necessarily anybody that's got it all right. I think some, like you say, I think both of you said, there's some people that do certain bits really, really well, but I don't believe anyone's got it completely kind of nailed down because.
And I guess also we don't really know because obviously when you don't work at the company, like, what is it actually really like? And like I said, I see it as like an inside thing as well as an external.
Perfect. Guys, we've got quite a few questions to get through, so we'll try and rattle through as many of them as possible in the next 5 minutes. So perhaps the one from Matt Woodcock. So how does HR technology play a part in piecing this all together for you?
HR technology. So when you think HR technology, I think like HRIS or like HR technology.
Or technology as a whole.
Well, I think there's like, you know, the like kind of more marketing side of employer brand. There's loads of cool tools and different things that you can use to make like posting content more easy, you know, making it like scheduled and in the right way and hitting the right people. And like, I think fundamentally things that track the data and the performance of the activities that you're doing, whether that's tracking who comes to your events and what the conversion is on hiring, or people like, you know, LinkedIn obviously has very nice features around like posts and impressions and stuff like that. So I wouldn't really call it like HR technology, but I think there's lots of tools, technology and channels. And I think, yeah, as long as you're like bringing them into a centralized place to keep all consistent. I guess actually maybe if we think about HR technology, we talk about like ATS systems, like some of them have nice features that push things out or can do campaigns on them. I don't use one right now
I
so
don't
much,
use one
but
right now. However, I think if you mean when you talk about technology as a whole, when it comes to say human resources and talent acquisition, you know, technology is the backbone of how everything is driven. And if you want efficiency and you want to save time and you want a central point where you're building future pipeline and you want a reference point where you see historical data in order to make decisions, you do need to have technology by your side. And like Jack mentioned, certain things are that you can utilize that just, you know, cut your time in half. But, you know, we can't live without it. And everyone's digitalizing globally. You know, it is the preferred method. And so I think you need to constantly be trialing and testing things out and see what works for you. But more the pipeline grows and more candidates you're processing through and all the people that you're onboarding, it really helps if you do have a, you know, what they call a candidate management system. It does help.
yeah,
immensely.
definitely. Yeah, I've worked a few places where you get there and it's like, hey, let's scale this on spreadsheets, which is so fun. It's also changing as well in the way that like people are building AI bots now that do your recruiting and your sourcing for you, do the whole thing. So like, who knows what world we will live in. Hopefully we'll still have jobs. Sure.
Okay, great. And then probably our final question so that you guys can get back to work is from Zara. So most technologists shy away from social media. How do you get them engaged?
Shy away, did you say?
Yeah, I think sort of people within tech teams tend maybe not necessarily always to be like super outgoing in terms of social media and like mega active.
I think that's like totally wrong. Sorry, Zara. I think like if you class social media, like it's a really sweeping statement to say that because someone's a technologist, they don't use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, if that's like how you see social media. But like if we're thinking about technologists, you have like, you know, GitHub, which engineers are sharing things on. You've got stuff like Dribble and Behance for more like designy product stuff. Like, if anything, my personal opinion bias would be that people within technology spend more time on social things. It's just not necessarily like, well, no, in fact, I just don't agree. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they get distracted by all this social media. They're so opinionated on engineers posting or whatever the current acquisition is going on between, say, two you know, competitors that they're always on there. And I like that fact. It's because you're still, you know, you need to know the latest buzz because that latest buzz might impact what's happening. Yeah. But also it shows that you exist in those communities too. So you can't avoid it.
I guess maybe the question could be, and I'm making an assumption here, but I'm just going to go with it because I don't have the ability to clarify it. Yeah. If you're struggling to get hiring managers to be active in like maybe creating content or getting involved in that employer branding and the company culture side of things, are there any kind of tips that you might have for trying to get those people bought into to supporting you and your teams and doing that?
I mean, I've definitely had that challenge with a few, you know, individuals. So what has helped for us is the ones that are active are keen to volunteer and support that, which was usually our juniors that have come through the door. We actually utilised that information and make sure that we show that activity. And like Jack has mentioned, and you should look at your return on investment. What has that driven? Did we gain a candidate through there? Did we start a conversation that helped contribute towards our branding more? Created a buzz in the community.
Start sharing the wins, really, if you are seeing success.
Share your wins, but it's all about trial and error, and it's not one fixed method. And you'll be surprised how people say we're quite afraid of change. Well, actually, we're not. We do eventually adapt to it, but that's when we're exposed and exposed to that tool or platform.
Perfect. The very last question, as I feel like we should answer it, is Esther's, but we are pretty much at time. So Bobbie and Jack, if I can ask you to reply in a very short sentence, how are you currently finding the market for recruiting engineers?
I think well, because we've hired a lot of them. I guess just to talk about Monzo specifically, the nicest thing about joining Monzo, and I love it, and I think especially for engineering, the diversity of thought we have in our engineering teams, is that we obviously use Golang as a programming language, but we hire engineers from any background and any skill set. I guess one of the challenges when I was at Just Eat was we were a .NET house, and then using .NET, and it's sometimes quite super hard when you live in one ecosystem. So I think one of the things that's made the challenge easier at Monzo, apart from a lot of the things that we have going well for us, is we hire engineers from any background. And I think it's really nice to see people coming in who have all worked at different types of companies and different types of ecosystems. Maybe it's the cloud services, whatever it is. So I think we're finding it pretty good. I think it's got hard. The challenge probably for us is more now we're diversifying more. Before we just wanted engineers who could work on loads of things. Now we're hiring specialist engineers with different experience. We need to hire engineers that have more technical leadership skills. It's a completely very flat structure, but we do need people who can take the lead on them. So that's an interesting challenge as we adapt. And I guess as our engineering changes the way that we do things. But I would say it's one of the areas. We have other areas that are super challenging, but engineering is an area where I feel like we're in quite a good place because of those things that are going for us.
Yeah.
Great. And Bobbie?
At Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, we've actually found it really, really exciting because we identified some amazing talent using different, platforms such as Hire has been major for us for our hiring. Networking for us has been huge because when we've hired these great people, they've come with a huge background of networks, so referrals through them have just been phenomenal.
I can second that. So everywhere I've worked, I think referrals is yeah. Sorry.
That's fine. So it's just been an amazing journey. Of course, it's hugely competitive. I think it's more competitive when you start seeking, say, like we are, senior lead engineers, because then you're looking for certain qualities that not everybody possesses, but so it takes a little bit more time. However, it's been a great journey. I mean, we do offer a lot of amazing benefits for our contractors and permies, working from home 2 days a week, lots of free food, great office space.
Oh yeah. Distributed working is amazing, and I actually really like what it does for the culture. I think I'm a massive. Even that said, yes, I think we've got 200 something people distributed workers at Monzo. Not all engineers, obviously, but I think it just shows the flexibility, and I think being open to people do part-time work, whatever their situation is. I think you should be as flexible as possible with the workforce.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. We are pretty much dead on the hour. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. It has been some great insights, some really useful information. We will be following up with you guys so you can have the recorded slide deck, so that will include the visuals and the audio as well. If we didn't have time to answer your questions, we will be sending them over to the hired team, who hopefully will be able to feed back and answer those questions for you. In terms of any follow-up, if you need anything from us, please do feel free to drop us a mail. Sally is the best person to speak to. But if you have any further questions, just get in touch, and we hope you enjoy the sunshine this lovely afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.